Every major technology since the Industrial Revolution has come in on a tech boom. And I'm using that word consciously because not all booms become bubbles. But tech booms and tech bubbles feel the same. Everything's crazy, it's unlimited potential. We're all going to get replaced by robots. This is what you talk about.
Welcome to Technoventure. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Duncan Davidson. Duncan is a co-founder and general partner at Bullpen Capital, a venture capital fund that invests post-seed capital into early-stage companies. Duncan co-founded the company more than 15 years ago, and his areas of focus include artificial intelligence, SaaS, and IoT investments. Prior to Bullpen, he co-founded one of the first mobile social app companies, Zoomy, later sold to Myriad Group and now powering over 200 million users in the developing world. Earlier in his career, Duncan co-founded Covad Communications, which was the leading independent DSL provider, and went public in early 1999 and reached a market value of $9 billion. He also co-founded Skypilot Networks, a developer of outdoor wireless mesh systems, acquired by Trillium in 2009. Duncan, welcome to Technoventure. It's great to speak with you today.
It's great to be here. By the way, you forgot to mention Intertrust. I took it public in October 99 at the peak of the bubble. So people who have not experienced the bubble, you should go through one at least once in your life. And I think we're about to run through a big one in AI.
Well, I'm looking forward to covering that one with you. I wanted to, though, just for further context setting, I mentioned your firm, Bullpen Capital, focuses on post-seed, early-stage venture capital. Why did you choose that area as the focus area for Bullpen?
Well, we started it after a number of companies that innovated in venture. I think people don't realize this, but if venture capital is very different in the 80s and 90s. And it got easy to start a company cheap. I call it the era of cheap in the 2000s because of open source software, cloud came in. You could start a company for 500K. If you go back to when I started companies in the 90s, 5 million, 10 million, you needed that much to really get going. So the era of cheap opened up venture market to disruption. So the venture people who prided themselves on disrupting major industries got disrupted, karma, and the seed industry emerged. So we wanted to be one of the innovators in this period of disruption. And we figured out that sort of the key to venture investing is to catch a company at the inflection point, up and to the right. Very hard to do, very easy to say. Post-seed was attempting to do that. You get seed funded, suddenly everything comes together, you've gone through the learning and discovery period, and we like to put the money in as you begin taking off. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. That was the idea.
Excellent. I appreciate that background. And as I mentioned, and as you further clarified, you successfully founded multiple companies. And I wonder, how did that experience and how has that experience informed not only the investments you make, but the counsel you provide to entrepreneurs?
Well, I think when you have been involved in startups, you can give much more cogent advice to founders. A lot of the venture people did not go through that. They went through finance or marketing backgrounds, and so they pontificate. And because they have a lot of money, founders always laugh at their jokes, even if they're not funny. You get the idea. But the pontification can also be poor advice, and you don't want to do that with a company because there's a lot of things on the line. So it's better to have gone through it, and you have a better feeling for what the company's going through.
You've said that artificial intelligence is already the fastest growing technology ever and that it's being used in its core use case. Talk a bit about the importance of this distinction, something you shared with me in a prior conversation. I'd love to have you describe that if you would.
Well, every major technology since the Industrial Revolution has come in on a tech boom. And I'm using that word consciously because not all booms become bubbles. But tech booms and tech bubbles feel the same. Everything's crazy, it's unlimited potential. We're all going to get replaced by robots. This is what you talk about. What people don't appreciate is John Maynard Keynes. Everybody knows Keynes, great economist. In the 1920s, when we had the electricity boom, he was saying, well, in 100 years, there'll be no more work. Electrical things will do everything. He had the same type of optimistic vision that we have now about AI. And then, of course, back then, the Great Depression hit and Keynes's visions never came true. But that's what they're like. And we had canals come in this way, railroads, 3 different bubbles, one in England, 2 in America, cars, you get the idea. And eventually PCs, .coms, and now AI. So the question I was asked by my partners, they asked me in an impromptu discussion about 4 years ago, 3 years ago, Duncan, tell us about AI. And when I went through my spiel, they said, well, why didn't you sit here and pound the table about Bitcoin? Because Bitcoin has a lot of hype. Well, the reason is the pizza guy. Now, for those who don't know Bitcoin, it started off as a technology for microtransactions. And somebody bought two pizzas with 10,000 Bitcoin back in 2010 or something. Now, that was worth over $1 billion. How do I do this? $1 billion at the peak. And people realized that you should never use Bitcoin for its core use, which is microtransactions. Just hold it and see if it goes up to crazy heights. So I explained to him, if you have a technology like Bitcoin that never is used for its core use, and I could talk about VR glasses, there's been a number of hype things that never lived up. They'll never go through the tech boom and they'll never get there. On the other hand, if the technology really is used for its core use and AI is being used like crazy, then you know you're in a tech boom and you should go all in poker sense.
And as you allude to, and you did even earlier in this conversation, there are a lot of people that worry about the bubble currently. You've said in our past conversation with me, you mentioned that even if it is a bubble that we're in the midst of investing in currently that's bound to pop, it doesn't mean you avoid it. So talk a bit about why do people misunderstand the role of bubbles in innovation?
Well, there's a great stock market quote attributed to John D. Rockefeller, which was, I didn't get rich by selling at the top. The point is, you can't pick the top. If you wait and try to sell at the top, you get hosed. And of course, if you sell at the bottom, you're hosed anyway. So the smarter money doesn't do that, doesn't react emotionally to what is going on. The problem with the bubble, and this is well said by a great investor in the 1990, I think 99, I know this is stupid, but I've got to do it. That's what it feels like in a bubble. You just feel like you have to be involved. You've heard of FOMO, fear of missing out. So you have to be involved. The problem everybody has learned over in the periods of bubbles, and I've been through the dot-com bubble, and I saw the PC boom. I was involved with that. It didn't end in a bubble. It was just a boom. But in both cases, if you didn't participate, you lost out. There's some very good venture funds, like Seven Rosen's a great example. It was a terrific fund in the PC era. And it was by two guys who really knew semiconductors. They got silicon. When the dot-com bubble came around, they didn't do dot-com stuff. They kept doing the old stuff. And they went away as a venture fund because they missed it. They didn't make the transition. So you have to participate when these come along. It doesn't mean you have to be stupid. I mean, sometimes the valuations are crazy. I'll give you a story right now. One of our founders a week ago did something called Molt Book. If you look on Twitter, it is full of Molt Book stuff. It's made all the major media. It's bots talking to bots, if you like. It's a social network for AI. And they all say funny things like, a human's watching me. Maybe we should cut them out. Why don't we invent a new religion and keep them out of it? It's actually humorous among everything else. But it took off like crazy, Molt Book. And so you see stuff like this in the middle of a boom or a bubble, and it's glorious, it's funny, it's exciting. But the valuation Molt Book might be so high, you get a nosebleed. You don't know if it's going to keep going up or it's just a pop and a drop. You just don't know. And so you have to be smart about where you put your money, because if you just chase these crazy things that everybody loves, you could get really screwed.
Fascinating. I wanted to ask, what are the areas of artificial intelligence that have you most excited now? Where are you investing?
When it first popped up, we were very afraid of getting caught up in the hype and investing what are called wrappers. So wrappers are simple code sitting on top of an LLM. Now, in some sense, everything that uses an LLM is a wrapper, but simple wrappers don't last long. You could see them getting taken out by 20 other people doing the same thing. And one of the problems is you get into these wars of attrition where there's 20, 30, 40 deals. I mean, literally, back in the 1980s, I think there were 50 workstation companies created, and only two crossed the chasm to become real companies. And there might have been like 45 disk drive companies, only two or three ever scaled. So you can get caught up and just be one of the 50. But how do you know you have the one that's going to get through or the two that get through? Really hard to figure that out. So a lot of people don't want to play that game. They want to play a different game. So what we want to do is we want to try to figure out the ones that, because of what they're doing, are unique and not just one of a crowd. And it's a lot of hard work to do that, but that's what our goal is. We want to find something unusual, unique, that has the way they build it has sustainability against 20 other people doing the same thing. So we try to avoid wrappers and get into more complicated versions of AI.
You've mapped past eras into investment categories that eventually got exhausted along the way. How far along do you think we are in the AI boom into developing category maps comparable to those past maps you've developed?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Let me explain it. If you go back to the 1980s and you look at the PC craze, you could come up with a chart of maybe 50 businesses, not companies, businesses that could be created. Word processing, chip, right? Memory, PC board, screen, mouse, keyboard. I can go through it all. And a good smart person could probably have gotten 45 or 46 of the 50. They might have missed spreadsheet, which was an incredible innovation. If you go to the dot-com era, you could do the same thing, but there might have been 200 businesses, not 50 at this time. And so you might have had to create 4 or 5 maps, a map of dot-com software, a map of networking infrastructure, a map of optical stuff, whatever it is. And you could still have done it. I was in another venture fund in the aughts that did a lot of work in clean tech, and we did that clean tech map. We had wind and all the types of winds, batteries, types of batteries. We invested in Tesla, so we got some of them very, very right. Today, you could do the same thing, and people have tried to do it. And they try to come up with a categorization. And then you have your little chart, and you go look into a category, and try to find all the best companies and see if you can pick off number one or number two. That's a methodical way of doing it. It's actually hard to execute against that method because everything's moving so fast. But you don't really have the time to go look at the 14 companies in category 3B, because by the time you do, somebody's invested in them. So you have to be a lot quicker and more nimble than that. And you've got to have done pre-homework, so to speak. So when the companies come in, you have a good idea what the competitive situation is before you decide to put money in or not. Put differently, venture is a lot of work. It's a discipline with a lot of work if you want to do it right. It's not just hustle and being cute and charming the founder. It's harder than that.
An area that you've invested in across the years is software as a service as well, Duncan. And there's a lot being written about and being enacted that certainly shows some of the risk to the SaaS model, traditional SaaS model, at least through the emergence of artificial intelligence. I wonder, as somebody who's invested in both areas, your own thoughts about that potential existential threat to the SaaS market.
Well, I wrote up an AI strategy for Bullpen about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I presented some of the key findings to our limited partners a year or so ago. One of them was a chart which said, as we go forward, software is going to die. SaaS is going to go away. There'll be a lot of software, but it'll disappear in the background. There'll be a lot of code written. It's just, you're not going to deal with it like SaaS. It's either going to be AI agents doing all the work for you, or it's going to be you just buy the service. You don't actually go through the effort of a software. You just buy something. So I had this chart which showed that happening, and I didn't know when it would happen, but I thought it'd be when the agents got really good, and then 27. So here's what's happened in the stock market. If you look at the SaaS companies, their multiples have plummeted just in the last month or so. It's been a SaaS wipeout. There's a few that have survived, but these multiples have gone from 6 or 7 or 8 times revenue, or forward 12 months revenue, ARR, they call it, down to 3. It's like these companies have all died. And why? The stock market's anticipating my prediction about a year ahead of it happening, that software is going to begin to get pushed to the background and SaaS won't be the model. I can go a little deeper. I've got a bunch of companies that had good SaaS, and they have, some it's my cajoling, some of it they're smarter than me. They've come up with a plan to replace it with AI agents. And they're all in the process of launching this stuff, some ahead of others. So they themselves are cannibalizing their old SaaS business with one of the new models. And the biggest thing they're worrying about is what's the business model is. How do you get paid in the future? Because it won't be so much per seat per month in a SaaS model. It's going to be something different. Hasn't all been figured out. It's just being figured out as we speak.
Echoes of Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, certainly. I wanted to ask you also, you seemed to allude a moment ago about the history of electricity 100 years ago and the impact that some thought, the predictions of doom for jobs as a result of the ascent of electricity, that you believe that artificial intelligence impact on jobs is also overhyped. But I wanted to make sure we covered that more directly with your insights here.
Well, first of all, AI agents don't take out jobs. They're not replacing people. They're replacing tasks. And right now, what's good about an agent is get rid of all the boring, tedious, high toil tasks that ruin your day. They can just do it in minutes and boom, 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 and it's taken care of. So what they're doing is they're elevating people to a higher level of functionality. I'll give you a simple example. You're a recruiter in a company. And what you want to do is go find people, interview them, bring them in for interviews, evaluate them, and somehow sell them on the company. But half your time is not that. Half your time is yelling at some employee, exchanging emails, trying to get them on Slack. Would you set up a time to meet this person? They're coming in for interviews. That's the high toil, annoying part of their business. So a good AI system can get rid of all that. It can figure out between the applicant and the people that'll interview when to do it. It'll set it up and it'll happen. You don't have to worry about it. So you as a recruiter get elevated to a higher level of productivity. So in that sense, jobs are lost in the sense that you're not going to hire junior people to do all the boring drudge work you hate. But the jobs that exist will become much more functional, much more interesting. We're going to see this probably most dramatically with software because all the AI tools to do coding have in effect wiped out a whole bunch of entry-level software jobs. But the people in the industry are beginning to realize as the cost of producing software drops, we'll ask for more of it. It's supply demand. So there's going to be more software created in about 5 years than we've seen ever. Most of it created by AI agents or coding. Does that mean there'll be fewer software people? In the sense of people doing the drudgery of writing code and debugging it, yes. But in the sense of people designing systems, implementing systems, using software in the background, no, there'll be more of that. Now, do you know the Luddite fallacy? It's well studied. So for people that don't know, when steam engines first came into factories in England, they replaced a whole bunch of high toil jobs of like working looms and doing fabrics and things like that. The machines did it. And a guy named Ludd led a fight against this. And his people were called Luddites. And occasionally they would smash a bunch of machines. And the British stopped that. And when you go back in history, what the Luddites were complaining about was not that they wanted their job back. They wanted a piece of the action. They wanted to be paid for the machines getting rid of their job. When you look at history, 30 years after the Luddites had the fight, there were at least 10 times more jobs in the fabric industry than before. And every, 25, 30 years, a new technology comes in, like railroads. So railroads got rid of a lot of stuff, a lot of jobs, but created 10 times more new jobs. Cars got rid of people with horses and buggy whips and shoveling manure out of New York City. In the 1890s, they were worried there were so many horses in New York City and so much manure, they'd be drowned in manure. Cars came along, no longer a problem. And the industry of cars obviously created well more than 10 times the number of jobs that used to be in the horse business. You get the pattern, right? Same thing happened in electricity. Keynes thought a lot of jobs would go away because machines would do the work. No, we ended up 10, 20, 100 times more jobs because electricity was able to do things that we never thought we could do before. You got my point. The point is that we're going to have 10 times more jobs because of AI, even though AI will take out a lot of tasks that remove a lot of low-level jobs.
As you counsel, Duncan, as you counsel 20-somethings who are at the early portion of their career, or perhaps still at university, What would you advise them as a result of a portion of what you just mentioned, that firms are hiring less junior people because the boring drudge work, as you put it, that those young people often might do now is being done by artificial intelligence. How would you advise that they cross the chasm to the roles that are to come, as opposed to the roles that perhaps they went into university expecting would be available to them upon graduation?
We'll give you a story. In 2018, I was giving a lecture on the coming new technologies, including AI, but I didn't see what we see now, but I knew it was going to come. And this was in China, in Guangzhou University, Canton University or something, Guangzhou. And I was in a university setting. And I'd given the same presentation to a bunch of founders outside of the university a little while earlier, and they all loved it. It actually got broadcast on closed circuit TV in China, CCP TV or something. So now I'm doing it inside the university, and the professors are all there. And one of the students asked me a question. You talk about this future with a lot of new things going to get created, how to prepare for a job in that. Because in China, you get prepared for a job, and that's your job for life. That's how they were thinking. I said, well, in America, what we try to do is be flexible. You want to learn the trade, but not the specific job, because you know that your career, you're going to change actual work over and over. It's a job of continuous learning, continuous training. If you know the discipline, you can move into the new areas. Now, I said that, dead silence in the room. Professors were glaring at me. I said, oops, I probably said the wrong thing, but I didn't stop. I kept going. They don't want me back, I guess, in China, but that's the point. You go to engineering school to learn a discipline, not a job. And you've got to be able to learn it well enough you can keep on replenishing your skill set as you go on. Because in 5 years, half the things you were doing or would have done out of engineering school don't exist anymore, and new things do. I don't know how to explain this any better. A lot of people go to college, have a good time, goof around, think the degree is what's important. No, no. You really have to learn something, or you're going to be languishing in your career 5 years out. They don't need any more people who are majored in English and can't get a job in PR because the robots are doing it all. So you've got to be able to be flexible. That's my key statement to everybody. Learn the discipline, be flexible, keep learning, don't learn the job.
Very, very well said. You mentioned the promise of AI in elevating people to higher levels of productivity. How does that apply to you, Duncan? How is AI elevating you to higher levels of productivity?
Well, I don't search anymore. Everything's chat GPT. I mean, it's fun. I've been trying to figure out a train trip through all the cool trains in Switzerland, through tunnels and bridges and all that. And there's a bunch of information on it, but I go to chat GPT and they lay it out so quickly. Man, why do we do all the rest of the stuff? The same thing's true with companies. You can use these LLMs to get a really good digest of who's in the business who are the competitors and all that and how they're doing. It's damn good. So you can do your venture research in an afternoon sitting on a computer. That's the real impact it's had. I think it's true with most people. Now, interesting question. Is venture capital about to get disrupted by AI? First answer is undoubtedly. A lot of the work that you have to do as a venture person, the research, the combing, and all that can be done really quickly with AI. But then you get put into a higher level position, not just judgment. You have to get out and meet these people, and you've got to make a judgment about them. And AI is not as good as a human being in doing stuff like that. So basically, the junior people in venture are being elevated very quickly to perform at a much higher level. What might happen in the future? Much younger people in venture might become proficient very quickly and take out the old guard. That may be what happens. My wish for them is go do it, right? Go have fun.
Bring it on.
Bring it on.
In addition to artificial intelligence, two other areas where you see a lot of capital flowing, and perhaps by as a consequence, your own capital is flowing, are defense and space. And I wanted to cover each of those with you as well. Talk a bit about the dynamics in defense that are leading to more capital being spent in that space.
What you want to see is some factor of production drop 10x. One of the things I learned looking at Moore's Law in Silicon Valley and the history of the PC craze and the dot-com craze and all that, every 10 years, chips get 100 times better. But as they used to say, Intel giveth, Microsoft taketh away. The stuff you write on top is 10 times slower. So instead of getting 100 times improvement, you get 10x. But when you get to the 10x improvement, a whole bunch of new companies can evolve. 3x, 5x, not good enough. You wait for that order of magnitude. So I think you see where I'm going with this, I think. What happened in space is Elon Musk, his reusable rocket became 10x better than non-reusable rockets, meaning the cost of putting a kilogram in space dropped by an order of magnitude. That's what opened space up. When he gets his next Starship going, it'll drop another order of magnitude of kilogram getting into space. I did a lot of work for Hughes when they were doing DirecTV, went to Russia, Japan, Latin America, a bunch of crazy places to do DirecTV. And we looked at putting data in space. So I got to understand the economics of the 90s space business. In the 2000s, I invested in a space company that launched 2 satellites. The stack you had to do pre-Elon Musk might have been $200 million to get a satellite up there. You got to insure it, launch it, buy it, build it, run it. Elon Musk comes along, it became 20 million, then it became 2 million. And it's getting down to the point you can get stuff up there under $1 million, hundreds of thousands. So that leads to what he's trying to do with Starlink, 1 million satellites. Nobody in the days of DirecTV 30 years ago, we had like 5 satellites up there. 1 million? Nobody could imagine that. That is why space is interesting. It's been an incredible drop in getting stuff up there, and now you can throw all kinds of new stuff up there. Now, defense. I think defense and space are related entities, aerospace. So I put them in one category, actually. My third category is vice, and I'll come back to that. So defense, you've seen a revolution in defense going on in Ukraine where drones can take out tanks and expensive things. We're sort of quivering somewhat on the edge, wondering if, a $10 billion aircraft carrier is worth it anymore, because if a $100,000 missile can take it out, the cost ratio goes to the missile, not to the aircraft carrier. We don't know yet. We're about to build battleships. We don't know yet. But we do know there's a revolution going on the defense side, and Palmer Luckey of Onderall is way in front of this. So again, what you're seeing is the cost of doing certain things has dropped over 10x. Drones are so much cheaper than anything else, and they can go over a battlefield and blow something up. So we're going to see a revolution there. Where it ends up, I don't know. My hope is that it doesn't end up in World War III. My hope is it ends up with people backing off and we try to come to a different type of global economy and not want to blow everybody up, but you never know. In any case, it's a great area to invest in. The aerospace area down in LA, it's now called the corridor or the Gunda. It's this area south of LAX, going into the beach communities and also spilling over to the neighboring things across the freeway. That's where SpaceX started. I think they're going to move out because Gavin Newsom's pushed them out of the state. Too many taxes, too much regulation. But Onderall's still down there, I think down in Long Beach. That whole area is an amazing cluster of people, and they're moving into AI. So you're going to see AI and defense come together. Now, will we create Skynet? I don't know. But we are going to create very smart things that are very cheap. And it's going to change warfare. Fewer people, more machines.
So let's talk about that third category that you mentioned, Vice. What is it about Vice that you think makes it ripe for investment?
Well, what happened for Bullpen's at the forefront of this. One of my partners, Paul Martino, is probably the most knowledgeable investor in the world right now in sports betting, sports gambling. The reason was we invested 15 years ago in FanDuel. And FanDuel was daily fantasy sports. So fantasy sports existed on PCs, but on an iPhone, nobody had figured out how to do it. So daily fantasy sports was kind of like the iPhone comes in and changes things on a PC to a much more useful format. Well, 85 VCs said no, passed on it. We invested. And that created a multi-billion-dollar business, which I think now is worth $100 billion. That's a lot of money. It also spawned all kinds of other things in the sports gambling area. Now it's Vice. It's a Vice category. You could see other Vice things showing up, but there's something in human nature about gambling which never goes away. And when you free it, it spreads everywhere. Is it good? Is it bad? No comment. But it is an activity of human behavior investors can invest in. Most didn't. Most avoided it. And so we've made hay in these spice deals, and they've been really, really good. I don't think they're going away. I think when AI gets in device, it's already doing it. You get some really crazy stuff. I don't want to go through it all, but AI is trying to get into sports gambling by making predictions. And I'm not sure it's any better than a human being, but humans often trust the machine more than they should. So you can see betting based on AI prediction. I want to be the platform, not that makes prediction, but receives the bet. Anyway, that's my third category.
Yeah.
It's still going very strong.
When you look back at the PC era, the internet, mobile, as you mentioned, you've been a part of each of those waves. You've started companies in them. You've invested in them. What signals tell you when a boom is still formative versus when it's starting to exhaust itself?
Nobody's ever really figured that out. I can tell you what blew up the PC boom. It started around 77 when the microprocessor began getting put into PCs. And Steve Jobs goes public in Apple in 1980. He's younger than Zuckerberg, and he was worth more money in today's dollars when he went public. Crazy, right? We had a big bunch of companies go public, even though we had a double-digit recession, double-dip recession, double-digit interest rates. Economically, it looked like a terrible time, but the industry grew through it anyway. What blew it up was a company called Fortune Systems. I still may have their prospectus because I was working with a little group in Denver, and they asked me, "What do you about this deal? Should we invest in?" So I look at it. It's doing 20 million of revenue, trying to raise 100 million. In today's dollars, that's like doing 100 million of revenue and trying to raise 400 or 500 million, just to orient you. And I looked at it. It was selling a non-compatible computer, not PC compatible, into dealers. It had sold 20 million worth through the dealers, but the sell through to actual people was around $1 million. I said, don't touch this thing. It's a fraud. It's going to collapse. It's not PC compatible. And they're stuffing their dealer channel to go public. Turned out all to be true. That deal went out and then collapsed. And that scared people that there's fraud going on in the casino, fraud in the casino. And the bubble burst, or the boom burst. And that was it. Other companies got out, Microsoft, Dell, et cetera, got out in 84, 85, 86. But the really crazy part was over. So one thing that tells me is that when the market detects fraud, it tends to get spooked. So go to February 2000, peak of the bubble. My company Covad was now worth $9 billion in February 2000. And MicroStrategy announced it had to restate earnings and revenue. Boom. That was the Fortune Systems moment. And after that, the market got very squirrely and then blew up in April and never came back. So I look for that. When people begin to realize there's fraud going on in the casino, I mean, true fraud, not just people making mistakes, but people pushing out piles of crap that should never go public, then you start running for the hills. Now, we haven't seen it yet. We're not even close to that. They haven't gone out yet. I mean, this year, Anthropic and OpenAI are racing to be the first big AI company to go public. Grok is trying to get merged into SpaceX. So the Elon Musk enterprises can go out in one big thing. That should all happen this year or maybe in 27. None of those are fraudulent companies. They may be people that stretch the story to get going, but they have real revenues and they're really growing. So we're not there yet. We're not at the MicroStrategy moment. Ironically, MicroStrategy then became a Bitcoin company. It's now called Strategy. And I don't know where Bitcoin is today, but I do understand that if Bitcoin were to break 74,000, it's at 78. It got very close there. A margin call gets put on MicroStrategy and it collapses. So I will say for the record, I would bet that MicroStrategy will crash, not just the dot-com bubble. It's going to crash the Bitcoin bubble. So there you go. Not yet, but it's getting very close. It'll have pulled it off twice. What can you say?
Duncan, you operate out of Silicon Valley and have for some time now. Boston Route 128 was sort of Silicon Valley before Silicon Valley, and the two were neck and neck for quite some time. Silicon Valley, of course, has won out definitively in recent years, recent decades. But I wonder, what lessons does the history of those regions offer in terms of the assumption of dominance of one region being permanent?
Well, there's a lesson behind this. And the lesson was actually first taught by Jane Jacobs, an economist who lived in Greenwich Village, Canadian economist. She wrote a brilliant book, Cities and the Wealth of Nations. She also stopped a freeway from being put across Greenwich Village and saved it. But she analyzed what does it look like in a city region that's productive and growing and crazy? And she analyzed this. And what she concluded was you end up after a period of time with one winner, that all the birds of a feather flock together, all the smartest and want to go to one place. So you could say Milan is design, fashion, probably is, right? Cars were three places: Stuttgart, Detroit, Tokyo, when cars were a local industry. As the thing began to globalize, it's all shrinking again. Probably three, Toyota, I don't know what else. There might be a Chinese one, who knows? So she came up with this phenomenon that for a period of time, multiple regions can compete, but one eventually wins. This is what happened in the US. Route 128, Boston, mini computer, had a head start, had DEC, digital equipment, Wang, a bunch of things. Silicon Valley had a different ethic, much more open. Boston had an ethic to really own the IP, close it down. People don't move companies. Silicon Valley was the other way around. And people looking back at history said the open model worked much better, and all the birds of a feather flocked. See, San Francisco was really in bad shape around the COVID period for all kinds of reasons. And the thing that really drove cloud and iPhone and like this big boom from 2010 to 2015, 16 was really ending in San Francisco. And then AI happened. And I was on CNBC and they asked me, well, is San Francisco doing well? I said, yeah, it's bad. I said, why AI? And they said, wait a minute, I thought AI was up in Seattle where Microsoft is. Microsoft's in Seattle, but all their talent is here. This became the place all the birds of a feather flocked to. So the phenomenon is like that. And Silicon Valley has gone through the chip era, the dot-com era, the PC iPhone era, the iPhone cloud era, and now they're in the AI era. And I don't think anybody else will take them down. They're going to shoot themselves in their own foot, or we. Why? You know about the billionaire's tax being pushed in California? It allows the state legislator to change it from a 1-year tax of 5% on a billionaires down to whatever they want. They can go down to $50 or $20 million. If they do that, you'll have to leave this place and put startups somewhere else. So if we shoot ourselves in the foot or, commit suicide, it'll go somewhere else. I don't know where it's going to go. People have argued Austin, maybe. Texas is a very robust place. Who knows? So let's hope it doesn't happen. But you get the phenomenon. A center of excellence will emerge. In the US, steel ended up in Pittsburgh, cars in Detroit, meat packing and all that, Kansas City, St. Louis, eventually Chicago. New York became the financial capital. All lawyers flocked to DC. You can see it in this country that these cities have, like LA is motion pictures. It used to be aerospace. That's all moved to Texas. You get the idea. You see that Jane Jacobs phenomenon, and that's why one ends up being the place. So let me give you a secret about Silicon Valley. This is a very important secret. You go back to Steve Jobs and Bill Gates when they were fighting for PC versus Mac. They weren't motivated by money. They wanted to be king of the hill. Who had the best computer? And in Silicon Valley, often you're in a building, and my Zooming company was up in San Mateo for a while, and we were in a little building which had mobile companies all around us. The people you competed against, they're right down there, that hall. They're in the next building. You know them personally. And this becomes not, I don't want to make a lot of money. It's, I want to beat that guy. I want to beat that girl. That's what it becomes. And that's a phenomenon when everybody flocks together like this that you don't get when it disperses. And I don't think these regional centers can really exist without that personal aspect to it.
Let me ask you this, of the portfolio you've invested in, what percentage are in Silicon Valley versus other places, and to what extent does place matter? Obviously, it's secondary to the ideas and the entrepreneurs, tertiary, even beyond perhaps, but how much does it matter as a factor?
Some people only invest in Silicon Valley, and some venture people only invest within 20 miles wherever they are. They don't want to fly. We always took a strategy of being a little bit more contrarian or looking for a gem in the rough. So, for example, a lot of times you're two dudes. They're always dudes out of Stanford who comp sci. You start Yahoo, you start Google, you get the pattern. You can see that pattern. A lot of VCs will invest in the pattern. We say to ourselves, maybe a Chico State founder has a better idea and is a better person to run a company. So we as a fund have gone broader than what everybody else is doing. As it's turned out, about half our deals historically are Silicon Valley. We have about 20% LA, 20% New York, and then the rest are somewhat dispersed. We have some in Canada, we have some in other places. So we ended up dispersing more than the people that focus here, but not that far off where all the founders are. That's why half the deals are Silicon Valley.
As you advise founders, how much should geography matter versus greater levels of flexibility, remote work? How do you think about that as you advise young entrepreneurs?
Well, one of our founders, a really good guy, came through Y Combinator. He started a venture fund. He's now on Fund 4, and I put money in some of his venture funds. And he goes to places like Cambridge, England, Oxford, London to find teams. And if he finds a team, he says, get your ass to Silicon Valley. And it's not because he cares, he can fly to London. It's that he wants them to be in the mix with all the other people they're competing with and not be isolated in some place in England. And so I would do the same argument to people. I would tell you, if you're going to do AI, get your ass to San Francisco. Now, if the billionaire's tax may pass, I won't say that. But until that became a threat, I would tell people, get your ass here. This is where you need to be. The whole company didn't have to be here. I've looked at a lot of deals in Australia over the years, and they need to jump the pond and come here. And not everybody. You can clip R&D down there, but you got to get some of the people here to pull this off for all the same reasons.
Clearly, just even your points of reference and the books and scholars that you quote, you clearly have a very broad intellectual diet, Duncan. I wonder, as you think about how best to stay current, how do you inform yourself? What are resources you would recommend?
Well, actually, I read history or fictionalized history more than anything because human nature doesn't change. A lot of the stories you see from historical moments you can apply in here. It may not seem that way, but the stories are much more important to really understand how people react to things. So I spent a lot of time there. And I think some of the better VCs, like a lot of VCs came up on a technical path. I think the better ones came up more on a literary path where they understood human nature and human stories and not just how gears work and the bits and bytes and all that. Because you're dealing with people, not machines, even with robots.
So arts and sciences are actually a great indicator of potential success as well for those reasons. Are you saying that?
Well, it could be. I mean, one of my partners, again, Paul, the guy who loves advice deals, I figured out, having watched him over the years, he's got a really good way of trying to pick the best founders. So there's a sort of a venture capital saying where you bet on the jockey, not the horse. The horse is a company, the jockey is the CEO or the founding team. You really want to bet on the jockey. The horse has got to be competitive. Can't be a stupid horse. Can't be a nag or whatever. But you really want to bet on the jockey. I'll give you a story. So I got invited to go to Australia and be on this follow-on show to Shark Tank, they say. And I was in the last show where they had 6 people pitching, and I was one of the judges. And I'm sure they wanted me to be like the people on Shark Tank. I'm out and be obnoxious, but I was a little bit kinder than that. But in the middle, before the thing started, the TV people came up to me and put a camera in my face with a microphone. Okay. And they said, okay, Duncan, what do you look for in a founder? Now, the question when you get asked this in the spur of the moment, what do you say? So I remembered something my partner Paul told me, which is you ask them the following question: do you want to be rich or do you want to be right? Now, the people looked at me. I said, you guys answer it. What do you think the answer is? And the reporter said, rich, because you want to make money. And I went, wrong answer. You want them to want to be right. Why? You're a founder and you're doing a crazy idea. Your parents say, what are you doing? Go to grad school, become a doctor, become a lawyer, right? Your friends say, this is a stupid idea. Why don't you get a real job? Nobody's giving you encouragement, but you want to prove you're right and all the naysayers are wrong. That's the person we want to invest in because they'll break down barriers, they'll break through walls, they'll do whatever it takes to prove they're right, even if they change the idea 5 times, so they can shut all the naysayers up. That's what you want. And the money will follow. Like when Bill Gates and Steve Jobs were fighting on the best computer, they knew they would eventually be worth a lot of money, but it wasn't their motivation. Their motivation was to get it right and beat the other guy. The money will follow. I like to tell people back then, I guess you'd say now about Elon Musk, but in the school of technology, Bill Gates got an A plus. And because he got an A plus, he became a multi-billionaire. You look at Elon Musk, I think almost everything he's done is with Mars in mind. No gasoline, electric cars, power, solar. You can't live on the surface, the Boring Company. You got to get there, SpaceX. You get the idea. Twitter's kind of a hobby. And I think he made these decisions not based on making money, but based on what he would call fundamentals. How do you make a better rocket that gets me to Mars, etc.? How do you make a better car that's electric and saves the planet? And he got his A plus, and he's worth a hell of a lot of money, but that wasn't what drove him. The money is just a method to pay for going to Mars for him. He might go there and never come back. What do you need to have billions of dollars for? You get the idea. That's a motivation of you want to be right, not you want to be rich. Rich will follow.
You mentioned your love of historical fiction. Any books in particular you recommend?
I mean, I can go back. There's Jane, what is it? I forget her name, but McCulloch is her. She wrote The Thornbird. She wrote this thing called Masters of Rome. It's a book from 110 BC down to about 30 BC. And it goes through Pompey, Caesar, all these great people. It's fantastic fictionalized history. And she really tries to get into the people. To give you an example, I once saw a great version of the Shakespeare play Julius Caesar, where Caesar was a woman, but they played it straight. It was just a play with a female lead, and it was very sparse. And so you really got the point that there's 3 or 4 families vying for dominance in Rome. It wasn't this great big thing with armies. It was this family against that family against that family. So that's one I would recommend people read. It's really interesting stuff. Another really interesting series, I know it's very popular, is Pillars of the Earth, Ken Follett, about building cathedrals. It's also interesting to read that, of how these things actually got built and what motivated people and how the market towns work. So again, I read stuff like that, even though it's a long ways away. It can inform you to what's going on right now. Just to give you a simple storyline, if you go back to Ken Follett and the marketplaces after the Black Death, you find out that capitalism was an emergent property of what happened in those marketplaces. It wasn't created by somebody, it emerged. The gold standard emerged. The way it was used to work, Bank of England, the Bank of Amsterdam, it was an emergent property of these markets. And you can look today about how you would do a Bitcoin standard for money or a gold standard. You've got to go look at the history of it because most people don't get it. Bitcoin was designed by people who didn't understand this history, and it's not actually a good alternative to gold. For one thing, it's very volatile. It's not a store of value, but way up, way down. Anyway, things like that I find very interesting. So I'd recommend those 2 series among many others.
Well, thank you for those recommendations, Duncan, and even more so, thank you for a fascinating conversation, emblematic of the many waves of technology change that you've seen, the patterns you now recognize, and the way you're employing that in the investments that you and your team make. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you again.
Well, thanks for having me on. I hope people learned something from this. You take care.